Friends, listeners, seekers of the extraordinary, let me tell you a story that will challenge the very fabric of what you believe to be possible. It's a tale that plunges into the deepest mysteries of time, biology, and the human spirit. A story not of fiction, but of an event so inexplicable, so profound, that it forced us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew. Imagine, if you will, the most relentless force in the universe, time. We perceive it as a constant, an unwavering river flowing ever forward, carrying us from moment to moment, day to day, year to year. But what if, for just one terrifying, bewildering night, that river didn't just flow? What if it surged, accelerating decades in a single, impossible breath, snatching years from a man's life, as if they were nothing more than dust motes in the wind? This is not a metaphor. This is the harrowing reality that befell Sergeant Michael Turner. At 27 years old, Michael was the epitome of peak human condition. A dedicated, disciplined, and remarkably fit soldier. He was precisely the kind of man you'd expect to find at a remote military research facility. Sharp, resilient, and utterly committed. This particular facility, tucked away in an isolated, undisclosed location, was a place where the ordinary rules of the world often seemed to bend, where classified projects pushed the boundaries of science and human endeavor. It was a place where secrets were kept, and where, on one unforgettable night, an entirely new kind of secret was born. Michael was known for his unwavering composure, his robust health, his youthful vigor. He was a man who lived with purpose, whose future stretched out before him, bright and full of potential. He went to bed on a Tuesday night, a vigorous 27-year-old, his mind sharp, his body finely tuned, ready for another day of duty. But Wednesday morning brought with it a truth so shocking, so utterly beyond comprehension, that it sent ripples of disbelief and fear through the entire facility. When Sergeant Turner failed to report for his morning briefing, a colleague went to check on him. What they found was not the young man who had retired to his bunk just hours before. Staring back from the bed was a stranger, or rather, a dramatically altered version of Michael Turner. His face, once smooth and unlined, was now deeply etched with wrinkles, particularly around his eyes and mouth. His once thick, dark hair had thinned considerably and was heavily streaked with gray. His posture seemed subtly stooped, his movements slower, more deliberate. The vibrant spark in his eyes had been replaced by a weary, distant gaze. He looked, unmistakably, like a man in his late 40s. A man who had lived 2 decades more than he had when he closed his eyes the night before. The initial reaction was a chaotic mix of panic, confusion, and desperate attempts to rationalize the impossible. Was it a prank? A sudden, extreme allergic reaction? A psychological break? But the reality was far more terrifying. This was Michael Turner. Undeniably, yet undeniably asterisk. Older asterisk. 20 years older. To be from 27 to 47 in the span of a single night. The facility's medical teams, comprised of some of the brightest minds in military science, were immediately mobilized. Every conceivable test was run, every parameter scrutinized. They checked for radiation exposure, for chemical contaminants, for exotic diseases, for any known biological or environmental factor that could induce such rapid aging. They found nothing. The air was clean. The water was pure. His food was uncontaminated. There were no signs of external trauma, no toxins in his system, no pathogens running rampant. The incident defied every known scientific explanation. But the most chilling revelations came from the deep dive into Michael's physiology. This wasn't just a superficial change. It was a profound, systemic transformation. His bone density had decreased, consistent with a man approaching 50. His muscle mass had degraded, replaced by the subtle but undeniable laxity that comes with age. His cardiovascular system showed the early signs of wear and tear typical of a middle-aged man, and perhaps most tellingly at a cellular level, his telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of his chromosomes, which shortened with each cell division and are a key indicator of biological age, had shortened dramatically precisely as they would over 2 decades of normal aging. His body, in every quantifiable biological sense, had genuinely aged 20 years. The implications were staggering. It wasn't an illusion, not a trick of the light or a medical anomaly that could be explained away by a rare disease. Sergeant Michael Turner had, against all laws of nature and science, biologically accelerated through 2 decades of his life in a single night. Amidst the frantic investigations, the bewildered whispers, and the desperate search for answers, Michael himself remained remarkably composed, if profoundly shaken. He told his story with a quiet, unnerving clarity. He hadn't slept. Not truly. He remembered lying awake, feeling the familiar hum of the remote facility around him. But then, as the hours stretched on, he began to feel something else. Something profound. Something that shifted the very air in the room. He remembered lying awake, feeling the familiar hum of the remote facility around him. But then, as the hours stretched on, he began to feel something else. Something profound. Something that shifted the very air in the room. Sergeant Michael Turner, a man whose life had always been defined by precision, by the tangible and the measurable, found himself adrift in an ocean of the inexplicable. He described it not as a sound, nor a visible phenomenon, but as a subtle yet pervasive pressure. An alteration in the very fabric of his. It began as a faint thrumming, not in his ears, but deep within his bones, resonating with an almost harmonic frequency. The room, his familiar, Spartan quarters, seemed to expand and contract, not physically, but perceptually, as if the dimensions themselves were breathing. He tried to dismiss it, attributing it to fatigue, to the isolation of the outpost, to anything rational his trained mind could grasp. But the sensation intensified. It wasn't menacing, not exactly, but it was undeniably a presence, formless and silent, yet radiating an immense, ancient energy. It felt like time itself had slowed to a crawl, then accelerated, then reversed, all at once. His tooth, usually sharp and focused, became diffuse, swirling like mist in a valley. He felt an intense pull, as if gravity had become directional, tugging at his essence, drawing him into an unknown vortex. His body, he recounted, felt strangely light, then impossibly heavy. He described a sensation akin to watching a sped-up film of his own life. Not any Marcus, but in pure sensation. Moments of joy, struggle, triumph, and sorrow flashed through him. Not as memories, but as raw, unadulterated feelings. It was as if his entire past was being compressed, reviewed, and processed at an accelerated rate within the confines of that single, bewildering night. He felt the weight of choices made, paths taken, opportunities missed, and victories hard won. It was an overwhelming torrent of existence, channeled directly into his consciousness. He didn't sleep, not truly. How could he? His mind was racing, even as his physical self felt suspended in an ethereal void. He tried to move, to sit up, to check his watch, but his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if disconnected from his will. A profound stillness settled over him, a quiet observation of an internal melt. It was a terrifying, yet strangely liberating experience. The fear of the unknown was immense, a primal dread that clawed at the edges of his sanity. Yet, beneath it, a peculiar sense of detachment grew, as if he were an observer to his own unfolding destiny. He couldn't explain the logic, only the feeling. A profound sense of acceleration, not just of time, but of experience, of wisdom, of the very process of living. It was as if every lesson, every heartbreak, every moment of growth that would normally span decades was being condensed, distilled, and imprinted upon his being in a matter of hours. He felt the subtle shift in perspective that comes with age, the quiet understanding of life's fleeting nature, the acceptance of imperfections, the wisdom born of accumulated mistakes and successes. These weren't thoughts he consciously conjured. They were feelings. Asterisks that simply settled within him, like sediment after a storm. As the night wore on, the thrumming intensified, then slowly began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of calm. The energetic pressure lessened, and the room seemed to return to its normal dimensions. He felt a deep exhaustion, not the kind that comes from physical exertion, but from an immense internal journey. When the first faint streaks of dawn began to paint the sky outside his window, a new sensation emerged, a quiet, undeniable heaviness in his joints, a stiffness in his muscles he'd never known. He pushed himself up, slowly, his body protesting with an unfamiliar creak. He walked to the small, polished mirror on his wall, his movements feeling strangely deliberate, less agile than he remembered. He looked at his reflection, expecting to see the 27-year-old Sergeant Michael Turner, sharp-eyed, clean-shaven, ready for another day of duty. What stared back was a stranger. The face was undeniably his, yet it was etched with lines he hadn't possessed hours before. Deep furrows creased his brow, mapping out years of thought and worry. His eyes, though still clear, held a depth, a weariness, a profound understanding that had been absent from his youthful gaze. His hair, once uniformly dark, was now liberally peppered with gray at the temples, catching the nascent light of dawn. His skin, once taut and smooth, had a subtle slackness, a texture that spoke of time's relentless march. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, to touch the face in the mirror. It was real. The slight tremor in his hand, the subtle ache in his shoulder, the unfamiliar sensation of his own skin. It was all real. He felt a profound disorientation, a disconnect between the Michael he remembered and the Michael staring back. It was as if he had woken up in someone else's body, a body that had lived a life he hadn't yet experienced. The initial shock was a cold, hard slap. Then came a wave of something akin to grief, a silent mourning for the youth that had been stolen. But beneath that, surprisingly, was a flicker of something else. A quiet awe, a strange, unsettling reverence for the impossible transformation he had undergone. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a living enigma, a testament to forces beyond human comprehension. He stood there for a long time, watching the sun climb higher, illuminating the new contours of his face, the silent testimony of a night that had defied every law of existence. The man in the mirror was older, yes, but there was also a peculiar strength in his gaze, a quiet resilience that had been forged in the crucible of the inexplicable. The world outside was waking up, oblivious to the profound shift that had occurred within these four walls. But Michael Turner knew. He had traversed a chasm of time, and now he had to find a way to navigate the profoundly altered landscape of his own life. The questions were immense, the answers elusive, but one thing was certain. The man who'd gone to bed at 27 was gone, and the man who had woken up at 47 had an entirely new journey before him, a journey that would redefine not just himself, but perhaps the very nature of human potential. The dawn broke, not just on a new day, but on a new epoch for Sergeant Michael Turner, an epoch born of mystery and charged with an unknown purpose. His life, and perhaps our understanding of life itself, would never be the same. The real challenge, he knew, was not just understanding asterisk what asterisk had happened, but understanding asterisk, why asterisk, and more importantly, asterisk what he was meant to do with it asterisk. The dawn, indeed, broke on a new epoch for Sergeant Michael Turner. The initial scientific frenzy that followed his inexplicable transformation was relentless. Doctors, physicists, biologists, they all descended upon him, a living, breathing paradox. Every test imaginable was run, every theory proposed and discarded. The results remained stubbornly consistent. Michael Turner's body had genuinely aged 20 years. His telomeres, the protective caps on his chromosomes, had shortened precisely as if 2 decades had passed. His bone density, muscle mass, cellular regeneration, all spoke of a man who had lived for 47 years. Not 27 yet. The answer to asterisk how. Asterisk remained an echoing void. There was no external cause, no logical explanation, just the undeniable, baffling reality of his aged self. For months, Michael was a subject, a phenomenon, a medical marvel. He cooperated with every examination, every interview, his own mind grappling with the enormity of it all. He felt the weight of those lost years, the experiences he hadn't had, the future that had been abruptly The profound disorientation lingered, a phantom limb of youth he could no longer feel. He saw the pity in some eyes, the scientific hunger in others, but rarely did he see understanding. How could anyone understand something that defied all known laws? He was a man out of time, living a life he hadn't earned, yet burdened by its sudden presence. His military career, once a clear path, was now a labyrinth. The rigorous physical demands of his old role were no longer suitable for his new, older body. Despite its surprising vitality, he was honorably discharged, not for inability, but for being an unclassifiable anomaly. This period was perhaps the hardest. Stripped of his identity as a soldier, stripped of his perceived future, Michael found himself adrift in a world that saw him as a question mark rather than a man. He grappled with existential dread, with the unfairness of it all. Why him? What cosmic lottery had he won or lost? He tried to find solace in the past, in memories of his 27-year-old self, but even those felt distant, viewed through the lens of an older, wiser, and profoundly changed man. The ache in his shoulder, the unfamiliar sensation of his own skin. It was no longer just a physical reality, but a constant reminder of the chasm he had crossed. But within that chasm, something began to stir. The initial grief, the confusion, the frustration. They slowly began to give way to a different kind of awareness. The what was undeniable. The how remained elusive, but the why and what to do with it began to crystallize. Not through scientific discovery, but through an internal shift. Michael started to realize that while his body had aged, his spirit had not been diminished. It had been tempered. He hadn't just lost asterisk. He had somehow gained them, albeit in the most unconventional way. He possessed the physical markers of a 47-year-old, but with the lived experience of only 27, now coupled with the profound wisdom of having traversed the impossible, he began to observe the world differently. With the sudden gift of perceived age came a different kind of sight. He saw the fleeting nature of moments, the preciousness of time, the subtle beauty in everyday resilience. He saw young men and women, full of the vigor he once possessed, rushing headlong into life, often oblivious to the quiet wisdom that only time could bestow. And he realized something profound. He had been given a unique vantage point. He was a bridge between two ages, a living testament to the fluidity of time itself. Michael Turner chose not to retreat from the world, nor to remain a mere specimen. He chose to live. He chose to embrace the wisdom that had been thrust upon him. He began to speak, not about the science of his transformation, for he had no answers there, but about the asterisks experienced. Asterisks of it. He spoke about the value of every single day, about finding purpose even when life throws the unimaginable at you. He became an unlikely mentor, a quiet source of inspiration. Young soldiers, struggling with the pressures of their calling, found in him a deep well of empathy and perspective. He understood the impatience of youth, the desire to achieve, but he also carried the unspoken weight of years, urging patience, resilience, and a deeper appreciation for the journey. He didn't just tell them to value time, he embodied the consequence of its unexpected passage. He taught them that true strength wasn't just physical prowess, but the ability to adapt, to find meaning in the unexplainable, to build a new life from the ashes of the old. His new body, though older, was still strong, capable. He found new ways to serve, working with veteran support groups, his unique story a powerful icebreaker, a testament to overcoming the most bewildering of adversities. He shared his story, not as a lament, but as a beacon, a reminder that even when the universe plays its most bewildering tricks, the human spirit has an extraordinary capacity to adapt, to find purpose, and to thrive. Sergeant Michael Turner's story became more than just a medical anomaly. It became a modern myth, a parable for our times. It reminded us that time is not always the linear, predictable force we assume it to be. It showed us that true aging is not just the accumulation of years, but the accumulation of wisdom, perspective, and an unwavering spirit. Michael, the man who had inexplicably aged 20 years overnight, taught us that sometimes the greatest gifts are disguised as the greatest challenges. His accelerated journey through time had given him an accelerated understanding of life's profound lessons. He lived out his unexpected second act with a quiet dignity, a profound sense of purpose that transcended the bounds of his initial shock and grief. He had not sought this transformation, but he had chosen to make it meaningful. He taught us that while we cannot control the hand fate deals us, we can always control how we play it. His story is a testament to the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit, a powerful reminder that even in the face of the utterly inexplicable there lies an opportunity for profound growth, for unexpected wisdom, and for a deeper connection to the mysterious tapestry of existence itself. So, what does Michael Turner's story tell us? It tells us that perhaps the greatest mysteries are not meant to be solved, but to be experienced. It tells us that time, in all its enigmatic forms, is our most precious commodity. And most importantly, it tells us that within each of us lies an untapped potential, a capacity to embrace change, to find purpose in the profound unknown, and to live a life so rich in experience and wisdom that it transcends the very boundaries of time itself. Michael Turner didn't just age 20 years. He awakened to a deeper truth, and in doing so, he awakens us all to the boundless possibilities of our own miraculous journey.